Welcome, welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the benefits of recovery housing for parolees. This is a training that was sponsored by Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. They provided a grant to Ohio Recovery Housing, making this training absolutely free to you guys. So, thank you also to Ohio Recovery Housing who put this training together for you guys. Our executive director, Daniel Gray, and of course, our education and training coordinator, John Kroll, who works tirelessly behind the scenes to put this together for you guys. So, thank you guys. And I also want to thank not only you guys for coming, but thank you for the job that you do. Just know that, I know personally firsthand that this is the population that we deal with is not always an easy population to deal with. In fact, it can be they can be quite difficult at times. But just know that you are bettering the lives of your parolees, and you are making our communities and neighborhoods just a safer and better place for everyone. So round of applause for yourselves, or give yourself a pat on the back. Thank you so much. I am your host, Angie Regan. I am the founder and director of Welcome Home SIS. SIS stands for not only our sisters in Christ, but it's also an acronym for System Impacted Survivors. The system referring to the criminal justice system. Our transitional housing and reentry program is the first and only one of its kind in the state of Ohio to focus on the gender specific needs of females post incarceration. And we're also a level 2 recovery house. So, what is a level 2 recovery house? How many levels are there? What is a recovery house? And what are these needs that are gender specific to women? And more importantly, what are the benefits of recovery housing for your parolees? So, for the first 20 minutes, we're going to talk about what exactly a recovery house is. We'll talk about the different levels and the basic fundamentals of a recovery house. For the next 20 to 30 minutes, I will explain a little bit about our program, the Welcome Home SIS program, and talk about what exactly these needs that are gender specific to women are. And it just so happens that these needs that these women have in reentry and post incarceration are exactly the benefits that are offered by Ohio Recovery Housing, or a recovery house. Okay, so what is a recovery house? Well, our sponsor, OMAS, the Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services, defines it as, or they say there are four critical or key factors in a recovery house. So first of all, it's drug and alcohol free right off the bat, right? And then secondly, it's resident. The length of stay is resident driven, meaning there's no set time period for the amount of time that these residents can stay in our house. It could be some residents may be progressing, as early as 90 days and be ready to reenter society, while others may take a little longer, and that's okay. Our program, we don't kick anybody out after X amount of days, and we certainly don't say, well, you have to stay, X amount of days to fulfill any obligation or anything. It's completely resident driven, and some will be ready before others, and others may take longer. And like I said, that's okay. Thirdly, one of the other key factors in a recovery house is it has peer recovery support. So the people in the house are all in recovery and they've been through recovery, and that's an invaluable resource to not only the people that are new in recovery, but also the people that are in long-time recovery, because they're helping each other and everybody's in the same boat, and it's just very, very beneficial. And fourth, OMAS makes it very, very clear that recovery housing is not treatment. This is a place for residents to come and recover. Um, Most of the residents have already been through treatment, and some of them are coming like right out of a treatment facility and into the recovery house as like a post-op type thing. In my house, the girls are coming right out of prison, but a lot of them, they complete their recovery, or they've been through recovery, while they're incarcerated. Okay, and guess who else defines Recovery housing. The law. The Ohio Revised Code defines recovery housing as basically housing for people who are in recovery from drugs and or alcohol, and it's a drug and alcohol-free living environment, and it provides peer support, and also another thing that is in this definition is it also provides resources for or referrals to outside resources. For example, when somebody comes to your home, especially like, well, in our home, these girls are coming from prison. They're not always from our county, or most often they're not from our county. And they need to know, like, where the NA and AA meetings are. They need to know maybe where the churches are. They need to know, some support, some stable, sober support outside of the house that's within the community. The National Alliance of Recovery Residences is a national organization that basically sets the standards for all recovery houses in the country. Ohio Recovery Housing is an affiliate, so just know that NAR, the National Alliance of Recovery Residences, sets the standards for the whole entire country. And when you're an affiliate like ORH is, you not only have to comply with their guidelines, but also the guidelines of Ohio Recovery Housing. So, like with Welcome Home SIS, our recovery house, we are an affiliate of ORH. So we comply with their guidelines and standards, but also the national level as well, because ORH is an affiliate of NAR. So, and NAR defines recovery housing as sober, safe, healthy living environment that is dedicated to promoting recovery from alcohol, drugs, and other associated problems. And we all know that, in a recovery house, we often have these co-occurring mental illnesses or mental, disorders that they go hand in hand. So not only does NAR set the standards for recovery houses, but they have also established different levels of recovery housing. And there's 4 levels, but in Ohio, a level 4 is our definition, or our state's definition of a treatment facility. So all of the recovery houses within the Ohio Recovery Housing Network are levels 1, 2, or 3. So, and ORH has guidelines for all 3 of these levels. And number 1, maintain a drug and alcohol-free living environment. Number 2, it's maintain a resident-driven length of stay, just like OMAS. That was, there in their definition as well. And number 3, we have to allow our residents to have a choice of their service providers, meaning, like, for example, when my girls, when they get out, when they're released from prison, it's in our requirements within our program that they have to have a mental health assessment and a physical with a doctor, a licensed physician. But we don't choose, who they want to go to. They choose for themselves. We give them a list of options. We help them make the appointments and things like that. But, we don't say, well, you got to go to Dr. Smith or Dr. Sally or whoever. We want them to have that right and that autonomy and that personal agency to pick, their own provider. And number 4, ORH is we have to maintain a landlord-tenant relationship with the residents. It's not like a treatment facility, basically. They have a lease. They pay rent. And it's the same. They have the same rights as if you were renting a house or an apartment from, a regular landlord. We want them to have those rights and protect them, and that's what this is in place for. So the 5th thing that is a requirement to be a level 1, 2, or 3 in an affiliate of Ohio Recovery Housing is you must provide the peer support, the peer recovery support to the residents in the home. And that kind of goes without saying. Everybody's there in recovery. You're all peers, and you're providing that support to each other. Now, you can have groups, you can have house meetings, things like that, but that differs from clinical treatment. And that's the next one. That's ORH makes it very, very clear, just like OMAS did. It's not treatment, and we do not offer clinical treatment in the home. If you think about it, if you start to offer all these clinical services and treatment within the home, it's not a home anymore, especially with the women that are coming out of incarceration. It becomes like an institution again. We want to get them out in the community. We want to get them, reintegrated and, a successful reentry. We want them to be productive members of their communities, and we want them to meet people in the community. So yeah, we got to get them out of the house. We don't want to, offer treatment and things in the house, because then it's like I said, it's institution. So what do we see right off the bat, guys, that all four of these definitions have in common? They offer a drug and alcohol free living environment, right? And also, if you look, OMAS and Ohio Recovery Housing, ORH, have another thing in common. Recovery house is not treatment. Recovery housing is not treatment, and we do not offer clinical treatment in the home, because, like I just said, it starts to be like an institution. And ORH also took the additional step of adding these two stipulations for level 1, 2, and 3, that we have to allow our residents to have a free choice of who their healthcare or service providers are, and we have to maintain that landlord-tenant relationship, and that's for the protection of our residents. Okay, so now let's talk about the different levels. And like I said earlier, NAR has established 4 levels, which in Ohio, level 4 is a treatment facility, and they are more than welcome to take advantage of the services that Ohio Recovery Housing offers, like the trainings and support and things like that. But they are not certified by Ohio Recovery Housing. They are certified by OMAS. So a level 1 recovery house is completely peer ran. It's democratically ran. They vote on things. They elect their officials, if you will. They have a president in most cases, maybe a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer, and everything is voted on. It's completely ran by the house. There's no paid staff at all. And the most common type of a level 1 recovery house is an Oxford house. So level 2s are, I believe, probably the most common within Ohio Recovery Housing, or recovery houses. Um, they have at least one paid staff member, which is usually like a house manager, and this house manager may or may not live on the property. And this is, I mean, it's peer ran, but they are overseen. It's not democratic. They're overseen, the governing or the rules and regulations and things like that are overseen by normally like the organization. For example, Welcome Home SIS is a level 2 recovery house. We have a house manager, but she complies with the policies and procedures of the organization that were already set in place for her. And it's important to recognize that level 2s are often referred to as sober living. And sober living is not a recovery house. They most often have the same policies and procedures in place, but they do not have to. For example, we have recovery plans, and we have, accountability procedures when those recovery plans are not implemented. We promote community and family within the home, and we have resident rights. And we also have a drug and alcohol free living environment, but sober livings are not mandated or required, or they're not checked basically to make sure that these things are in place. Okay, so a level 3, this is where you start to kind of get on the more clinical side of it. It's not clinical treatment, but it has a full staff, or not necessarily full staff, but it is supervised 24/7, whereas level 1 is no supervision, it's just peer ran. Level 2 is just monitored by a house manager or a senior resident. But level 3 is they have a staff there that there is there all of the time. You still have your peer support, of course, because that is a requirement of any level in Ohio recovery housing, but you also have some more professionals that maybe are credentialed that come in and offer life skill classes, if you will. A couple other things that differentiate a level 3 from level 1 and level 2 are that level 3s are required to have a weekly schedule of activities. And these activities include a house meeting every week, formal life skill development classes or courses, and formal recovery events. You can't just, put something on the calendar like, the ORH conference. It's got to be something every week that's recovery oriented, and they have to be scheduled every week. And then also the staff code of conduct, because they do have a staff, unlike, level 1 and some level 2s. They have to have a code of conduct, and they have to have training, and they have to have, development and performance reviews. So the social model of recovery is going to have 6 domains. And the first one is leadership. Most of your roles and responsibilities are going to be carried out by peers in the house rather than like a distant superior or a staff member. Okay, the second domain goes along with the leadership. It's experientially credentialed. Now, that is your lived experience. You have the experience of being in recovery or suffering from a substance misuse issue. And, that is your credential right there. And, when we start to get into the level 3s, we start to introduce more staff and more credentialed professionals. But the peer support is still there. And that peer support goes, I'm going to say a little bit further than somebody with degrees, especially like in our case. We're also a reentry program, and I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I have multiple degrees, and I can speak to somebody that's, on the recovery level. But as far as being to prison, I've never been there. I've been incarcerated, but not actually in prison. And it goes a long way with gaining respect and having that authority and, that lived experience. They don't want me to come in and tell them what to do and how to do things when, I've never been through exactly what they've been through. I've been through the drugs and alcohol and the recovery and incarceration, but never the prison experience. And so, I had to get somebody in there that had been to prison. And this is where kind of the first domain comes into play again, promoting from within. We want to promote from within. We want to give these girls jobs because it's hard to find them employment anyway. But we want somebody, as a house manager, as the senior resident, as a marketing person, somebody that has been there, done that, and that they can relate to. Up just a minute. I don't want you guys looking at the same boring slide or just one slide. So the third domain is governance, and this is your boundaries, how you enforce these boundaries. And I wanted to take a minute to go over, and there's also your policies and procedures. And while we're on this, I wanted to talk about just a second about the policies that are required by ORH to be certified as, an affiliate. So first of all, you have to have the resident application, the resident agreement, and a statement of the resident's rights. And all of these have to be in your manual, and your manual has to be in the common area where all the residents have access to it, and they have to know where it's at. They have to know that, they can get to this if there's anything that they need to look up or want to know. And then the policies that have to be in there, we have to have a grievance policy. If your resident has an issue, who do they go to? What does the protocol look like for that? If they have a problem, do they go to the house manager? Do they go to somebody else, or what does that look like? Medication policy. Is medication self-administered? Do you not allow medication? What about narcotics? All of that has to be in your policies. And the drug testing policy. Is drug testing random? Is it given like on a certain day? And what happens if somebody refuses? So that's a policy that we definitely need in there. The good neighbor policy. We want to be good neighbors. We don't want our neighbors saying, well, there's those people in recovery, that are on drugs and alcohol coming into our neighborhood and messing up, and going to the city council meeting or something, complaining about us. We want to have a policy in place where we can be good neighbors. So if our neighbors are complaining about something, there's a protocol and there's a procedure to follow, for that. So, and we actually don't have any neighbors where we are. We have a couple, but they're way off, and it's a good thing because we have a rooster, and he's pretty loud. But actually, the goose is much louder. Okay, emergency policy. What happens when there's an emergency? When we have a pipe bust, do you call 911? Well, no. It's certain certain things constitute an emergency where you would call 911, like a life-threatening situation, or a suicide attempt, or something, or drugs. Somebody's something like that. But I mean, a plumbing emergency, call me, or call a plumber. Communicable disease policy. That's just basically, we wash our hands. Everybody's living together in the same house. I can't tell Sally that Sue has the flu. I just want to respect her, the confidentiality of that. Just with good hygiene, let's just wash our hands, because you might not know when somebody has the flu or COVID or whatever. And then the Rittenhouse rules. We have to have the rules, which are over there to the left. Those are just some examples of rules. Curfew, no visitors after a certain time or whatever. Where do you guys smoke? Chores. Chores is a big one with ORH. They want to make sure that there's a chore chart and everybody's doing the chores and they're completed. And signing in and out. Some of these are just, the preference of the organization. And then the noise, and we have a language policy or rule where, we don't want anybody cussing. We want you to act like ladies and, and respect Christ and be Christ-like, basically. And let's see what else. The policy on paid work agreements. Obviously, coming out of prison, a lot of these girls, they don't have any money. But there is a charge and a fee for most recovery programs and houses. They don't live there for free. It's a hand up, not a handout. So if they don't have a job or have money to pay, then they enter into a paid work agreement, and we will find something for them to do. Most of the time, with me anyway, it's just administrative task. It's busy work, actually, which I like to keep them busy. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. But something to do. You can't sit around and do nothing. You got to pay your rent. You got to earn your keep, I guess, so to speak. And yeah, so there's a policy on that. We have to pay a minimum wage, which we don't want to pay them, not anything less anyway. Which most of the time I give them a lot more than minimum wage. And like I said, it's busy work, but we keep them busy, and that's pays for their rent, so to speak. Fourth domain of the social model is promoting a home and family-like environment. And this is a big one with us, with Welcome Home SIS. These girls, our residents, are coming usually most often like right out of incarceration. And we don't want them to feel like they're being institutionalized again or into another prison. So we want to promote the home family-like environment. And I used to get, the Department of Reentry from the ODRC has came out to the house several times. But the first time I got an email, I'll never forget it. And I was like offended by the fact that he called it a facility. And, I was like, this is not a facility. This is where these girls live, And he was like, well, I'm just, used to the language. But anyway, but yeah, so we promote a home and family-like environment two different ways. The first way is architecturally. So what the furnishings in the home, the things hanging on the wall, the decorations, and you can see in our picture, we've got books, we've got pictures of the girls sitting around, we've got other stuff hanging on the wall, and I'm glad you can't see behind that recliner on the right, because you would probably see a pile of shoes belonging to the girls, and that's home-like, but not appropriate for the photo, so. The second way that we can promote a home and family-like environment is through its functionality. How is the house functioning? That means, like, what activities, what things are you guys doing together? And in our house, I want the girls to sit down at least 5 nights a week. I want them to cook dinner together, prepare dinner together, and eat dinner together. It's not always practical because, some of the girls are working or have meetings or whatever, and then that's fine because that's what we want. But at least, we'll sit down and have dinner. And another way is game night. This is always like a hit in the house. Everybody loves game night, and it's so fun. And I always tell the girls, I'm telling you right now, you want me on your team, but because of that experientially credentialed thing, I don't always get picked. So the next domain is it's recovery oriented, meaning that it's person driven. Nobody can recover for you. Individuals must take ownership of their own journey. And recovery is holistic. Substance misuse is just part of the problem. The solution requires a comprehensive approach to the underlying issue, which we'll talk about here later when we talk about the gender specific needs of women. So, last and certainly not least, the sixth domain of the social model is it is community oriented, meaning we want to get these girls out in the community. We want them to meet people. We want them to know the resources, and we want them to be able to translate and verbalize the resources that are out there to new girls coming in the house. And you can see there's our besties from the ODRC, Department of Reentry, and we've also got some women from church at the bottom there. And then we've got another donor that took us shopping at Rural King and donated some stuff. But, we do this a lot. I do this a lot. I take them to meet the mayor. I take them to meet the chief of police. And they used to, give me excuses. Well, I've got an appointment or I've got this. Well, okay. And then the next day I'd be like, well, they're coming over for dinner tonight because you do eat dinner. And guess who's going to sit down with the prosecutor? They love it. Not really, but they get used to it, and it's good for them. So that's the gist of what a recovery house is and what we do. And now we're going to switch gears a little bit. I do want you guys to know the needs that are specific to women because that's what I deal with. We were founded in 2019. We got our first house in 2020, March 2020, right when COVID hit. And before that, I was a professional student. I was a graduate student, dual mastering in law and sociology. And if anybody laughs because I was almost 50 as a graduate student, then you do not pass the class. So just kidding. Everybody passes. But anyway, I want to go over the gender specific needs of females because it is really, really important. And females are obscenely overlooked and reentry and incarceration even. I'm sure you guys know they're the fastest growing prison population, and they are being incarcerated at twice the rate of men. And they do take a different route to prison, which is why they need a different way of reentering society, or we need to focus on these needs that they have when they are reentering society. It's very, very crucial. So you guys can read over this slide later. You guys will all get a copy of the PowerPoints, but I want to move on for the sake of time. Very, very briefly, I want to touch on the physical health. These are needs that are gender specific to women. Women released from prison, they often have multiple health issues compared to their male counterparts. Not that men aren't sick when they get out of prison. And so when we're talking about this, just know that it's not that men don't suffer from the same things, but it's more prevalent in women. So women have more STDs. They have Hep C is a big one. They just have, and they're hospitalized more often than men. So we need to focus on their physical health. And also, when they're in prison, they don't eat right. They don't have healthy meals, and that's where the Get Fresh Garden comes into play. But they don't exercise. They don't. Their health is often in very, very poor. They're in very, very poor health when they come to us most often. High carb, low protein diet that will take a toll on your body in itself. Moving on to mental health. More than half of the female inmates in Ohio and in Ohio prisons are on the mental health caseload. And when I say caseload, I mean they're actually receiving medication for it. A lot of girls don't want to be on the caseload because it's a hassle and it's another click, if you will. But that's compared to only 17% of the men. Now, we only have 3,000, or sorry, 5,000 women, but we have 3 prisons for women in Ohio compared to what's like 24 for men. So only a small percentage of men are reporting this mental illness or disorder, whereas over half of all the women are. Um, and most of these women, they come to us, if they don't go into prison with one mental disorder, they come out with at least one, in my experience. And most of the women go into prison with a mental disorder, and it's often exacerbated by the prison experience. And in my experience, all of the women that have come into my house have had at least an average of 3. The most common being PTSD, bipolar, anxiety, depression, and most of these illnesses were caused by or the result of a trauma, a former trauma that they had suffered. And most of it was sexual, and most of it was as children, in my experience, the girls in the house. So what do women who have suffered this trauma and lack essential coping skills do? They self-medicate, often with substances that are ultimately illegal, and then that lands them in prison. Issues with substances go hand in hand with mental health. You're not going to be addicted to drugs without having a mental illness in most cases. And you're not going to be addicted to drugs without it having some repercussions on your physical health. All of these go hand in hand. So women in general are more receptive to treatment than men while they're incarcerated and while they're in reentry. So now let's look at, why are these women being incarcerated at an astronomical rate? Plain and simple, they're drug-related offenses. I believe it was the ACLU that came out with a report not long ago that read 24% of women in Ohio prisons and jails were incarcerated for drug offenses, which I'm sure that's true. However, we have to look at drug-related crimes, which is over 80%. Over 80% of the women that are incarcerated in Ohio and nationwide are there because of drug issues. When we first started this organization in 2019, we were strictly a reentry program. However, to date, all of the women that have came to us had been incarcerated due to some issue with illegal substances. So we know that in order for these women to have a successful reentry, we have to focus equally on their recovery. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. When I founded this organization, my goal was and it's still my goal, is to keep these women out of prison. I wasn't realizing the importance of the recovery aspect of it. I'm a person in recovery. And when I founded this organization, I was a graduate student. I was dual mastering and working on 2 theses simultaneously. And one was on collegiate recovery programs, and the other was the re-traumatization of incarceration as it pertained to women. But until I saw it in the house and I saw it firsthand, it didn't click, if you will. Recovery is so important for these women. I now know that in order to reach my goal is their goal, and the goal for this organization, keeping them out of prison, recovery has to be on first and foremost. If they are not going to stay in their recovery and continue their treatment, it's simply put, it's a wrap. Simply put, in bottom line, it's not going to be successful. So, what is the key to, or the foundation of every and all successful reentries? If you think about it, all productive, law-abiding citizens have this one thing in common. It's a safe, stable living environment. And Housing is key. I mean, I said that, recovery is first and foremost, but without the housing, you can't focus on the recovery. The reason that this is gender specific to women is, well, persons in reentry, both male and female, are going to be 12% more likely to face homelessness than your average person or the general public. But women are extremely vulnerable to being homeless, and they're 35% more likely than their male counterparts that are in reentry. And one of the reasons is, if you think about this now, when men are incarcerated, they have a woman on the outside who is attempting to hold the family structure together, whether it be their wife, their girlfriend, the mother of their child, or even their own mother. There's somewhere that he can go most often when he's released. When women are incarcerated, the men in their lives are not as likely to stick around, leaving them homeless. Or they can go back to the streets, they can go back to that pimp, they can go back to that drug dealer, they can go back to that abusive situation, that abusive relationship. They can go back to that same situation that landed them where they are now. But we want to stop that cycle. So we want to offer them a safe, stable living environment. In 2021, we had two women that we had to turn down because we didn't have the room. And both of these women were on parole. And unfortunately, both of these women went back to prison. One, because she was sleeping in a vacant building, or a building that she thought was vacant. And she was there because she had nowhere else to go. She told me that she was just trying to keep warm for the night. And we know that, statistically speaking, without a safe, stable living environment, these women will reoffend. It's inevitable. They're going to go right back to prison. Well, they might not go back to prison, but they will reoffend. And that's a problem for society. It's a safety issue for the public. You guys know that. Was it our fault these women went back to prison? Oh, of course not. Could it have been prevented? Absolutely. Absolutely. And in most of these cases, it's just the simple things that these women need. Just a second chance and a hand up, not a hand out, but just simple things. The third thing that I want to touch on, guys, is a support system. This is offered by a recovery home. Just to recap briefly and stating the obvious, a recovery home is going to offer, our focus is on recovery. And we have a home for them. And those are the two most important things that are crucial to a successful reentry for women. And a support system is third. Women, we thrive in environments that are therapeutic, that are welcoming and accepting. We know that men in prison form gangs and women form what? They form families, because that's who we are. That's inbred in us. That's our nature. And women know that the women in the house, they know that they are accountable for each other. Then they're responsible for the safety and the integrity of the house. At the end of the day, if somebody is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, then that could threaten, another girl's custody case or her parole. And they know this. And honestly, I was kind of worried about, them taking over the house and just sticking together and doing criminal things. But the snitches thing, or that nobody snitches, is pretty non-existent, to be honest, from what I've seen. It's they hold each other accountable, and if somebody's doing something they shouldn't be doing, another one's in my office telling me about it right away. So, because they don't want to threaten their freedom and or their custody of their child. And this comes back to the family aspect of it. And a lot of these women, they don't have families on the outside. And research tells us this, but I mean, in my experience, there's only been two women that we have housed that had a parent that could be considered a source of support or a positive support system. Most of these women, their mothers were incarcerated themselves, they were in active addiction, or they were deceased, or they just didn't even know who their mother was. We had one girl she was literally born in a prison. This girl came to us, and she also had two kids that were born while she was incarcerated, and they obviously were taken from her because she was in prison, but they were also born addicted. And society had given up on her. And statistically speaking, this girl never had a chance. I mean, she's doomed. Her kids are doomed, from what research is telling us, and from, the odds are against her already. But, she just needed a chance. She just needed a little help. She came to us. We took her to church, and we enrolled her in college, and she's working on 2 bachelor degrees, and she's doing well now. But this is the prime example of her mother being incarcerated, her kids now being incarcerated. This is the prime example of generational trauma that incarceration is causing. The cycle of trauma, addiction, incarceration. I mean, it's very, very vicious, and unless we can break it, then they don't have a chance. So next, I want to show you guys just a brief video. It's about 3 minutes long. It's a testimony from one of our residents, and her story is really not unlike all of the other women that come to us. She was in foster care. She doesn't know who her mother is or was, but luckily, she came to us, and she's doing really well, and her kids now are doing really well, and they stayed with us for a while. But so after this video, I just want to kind of briefly recap on all the benefits, and I'll see you guys in a second.
I learned about Welcome Home SIS from somebody else that I was in prison with, and I corresponded with Angie back and forth through emails. It was the general idea that that's where I was going to go, was Welcome Home SIS. Well, then without notice, the county picked me up and took me back to Franklin County Jail. They released me the next day on a bond. And I was freaking out, calling Angie. I couldn't get a hold of her. I was leaving voicemails, because I was afraid. I didn't know where I was going to go, whether I was going to have to go back to the dope boy or not. Thankfully, Angie answered the phone. She came and got me. She picked me up and brought me here to Byesville. My life slowly got better every day since then. Slowly I gained confidence back and, began to believe in myself a little bit more every day. By being there and having that support system, I didn't have anything. I didn't have a toothbrush. I didn't have a place to lay, food, anything. And she made sure everything was taken care of. So I'm extremely grateful to Welcome Home SIS and everything that they've done for me. I continue, to do the things I do every day because of the foundation that Welcome Home SIS gave me. If I wouldn't have had that, who knows, I could be turning tricks for $10 worth of dope, nowhere to lay my head at night. But Angie was there, and she cared, and she helped me. And today, it might not be a lot for some people, but it's a lot for me. I have my own apartment. I pay my own bills every month. I have a car that I paid for. I see my kids every week. I get them on the weekends. I work a full-time job, and it's rewarding to know, I did that for myself, but with the help of Welcome Home SIS, because without that foundation or, just having her number to call somebody to come and get me, I could be dead right now. I could have overdosed and from a relapse, and I maybe wouldn't have found my way back. So I just wanted to take this time to say thank you to Welcome Home SIS and everybody that's helped me.
Okay, guys, so all of this is coming full circle now. The gender-specific needs of women are exactly what the benefits of recovery housing is. And, housing, it's foundational. They've got to have housing. They've got to remain in their recovery, and they've got to have that support system. And these are three of the main things that not only women need, but that are offered by recovery homes. And so, I mean, what's in it for you guys? Are there any benefits for you guys as parole officers? Well, your goals are our goals. Your rules are our rules. Rules, for example, you know, I believe that my curfew is probably earlier than what you guys require. Things like abstinence, no weapons, no contact with other felons, except for the girls in the house, of course. But we're all on the same page, and together we can really, really make this thing work, and we can make society a better place and our communities just a better place to live in, a safer environment for everybody. So, what is in it for society, if anything? Well, yeah, I'm going to state the obvious again, guys. Recidivism. When you give these girls a safe, stable living environment, simple things again, like a home, they're not out on the streets. They're not doing drugs. They're not doing whatever they got to do to get said drugs. They're not robbing, dealing, tricking, killing even to get these drugs. So just by housing one woman, the prevention that we're causing or the damage that we're preventing to society is something that I think that, I mean, I'll never be able to grasp. We'll never know. I do like to say in our program, it's not so much what these girls accomplish. Enrolling in college, getting a job, getting their kids back. That's very, very important. That's tremendous. But it's not so much what they do, but what they don't do. And like I said, the damage that we prevent to society is something that we fully never ever grasp. I think that we all know someone who struggles with addiction, and we probably maybe even know somebody that has passed away due to addiction, and somebody sold them those drugs. So, switching gears here, guys. It's not all dreary and bad. I do want to focus on the good things because these are, what we were talking about. Those are the things that we prevent. So, we have 12 benchmarks. Welcome Home SIS uses 12 benchmarks, if you will, to determine what makes somebody successful. And not all of these are going to be applicable to all women, but they do. I mean, we'll be able to see, some of them at least, like safe housing. Do they have stable housing outside of, our house? We know that they have it with us, but when they're ready to, become independent, do they have a safe, stable living environment? Are they maintaining their sobriety? Are they attending meetings regularly? And have they continued their health, their physical and mental health? Are they continuing with those appointments? Have they got their ID? Which that's one of the first things that we do. We register them to vote. We get their ID. That usually takes about a week, to be honest, but we get their ID because nobody wants to go get a job with a prison ID, and you can't do anything without an ID. And the next thing, are they enrolled in school or are they working? And that's sometimes challenging to get them a job, but if they're not, then they can get their GED or they can enroll in college. And nextly, are they complying with the conditions of their parole or probation, and have they not been rearrested? I know you guys love that one. I mean, we don't want anybody back in prison, and I said, that was the ultimate goal. Obviously, things that to keep them out of prison, or keeping them out of prison is not going to just happen, like unless you kidnap them or something, and then I go to prison for kidnapping. We have to the independence, the self-sufficiency. When you're right with the Lord, or I want to keep them right with the Lord. So when you follow these guidelines, they're not going to go back to prison. And in order to be independent and self-sufficient, we've got to focus on the housing and we've got to focus on that recovery. And they've got to have a support system, plain and simple. The last couple things that we use, which I said these are all not going to be not all applicable to every woman, but we set goals when she comes in upon intake, and is there progress towards achieving these goals? Which one of them would be, independence and housing and getting her kids back or whatever, and are they able to access their government benefits? Which I would like for these women to be totally self-sufficient and not live off the government. But when they're first released, it's something that's it's a given. We know we have to do that. They have to get their medical. They have to get their food stamps. The goal ultimately is to get them off the food stamps, period. They're learning to grow fresh fruits and vegetables and eat healthy, and we don't need them getting food stamps. The medical, like I said, I mean, they have to have the medical. Very, very quickly, before I turn it over to Perry, or before you guys go for like a short break, I want to go over the outcomes very, very quickly again. For March 2020 is when we got our house, and our first house, and we only have one. We just upgraded or moved into a bigger house. Till now, we have housed 30 women, 10 children. 15 of those women became employed, which 3 of them enrolled in school. 6 of them were disabled where they couldn't work, and only one of them recidivated. And she just went back to prison, and believe it or not, it was for because she just didn't check in with her parole officer. She was only there 2 weeks, but she just bounced, and yeah, she just didn't even check in. So, and I really hate it. But other than that, because the number's so low, I really can't say like a 0 recidivism or a 80% or success rate, because then you still got, you know what I mean. But anyway, 3 have relapsed, and only 1 has recidivated and went back to prison. And I think that's pretty substantial. So thank you guys for your time, and thank you guys for paying attention and staying awake. And thank you most of all for what you do for your job, and thank you for your partnership, guys. God bless you guys. So gender-specific needs are needs that are either more prevalent in women or they don't really pertain to men. Let's look at first employment. Everyone in reentry faces barriers when trying to become employed, but the stigma is much higher when you're a woman, and women are going to have more problems becoming employed than men, because society judges them differently when you have a criminal record because they're women. It's more acceptable for men to have a criminal record, basically. Another big one is family reunification. We want to try to make this happen if at all possible, for these women to get their children, and children need their mothers if at all possible. And most of these women, they're going to have an open case